Hey all, so we've made it to the end of the series. This is the last video discussing essential champions for Alliance War offense. I may update this in the future when, season globals change enough or, another couple months worth of champions have come out, see if the meta has shifted, either because a new attacker deserves to be added to one of these two tiers, or because a new defender has made an attacker who I had my eye on, or maybe who I didn't have my eye on, but hadn't ranked, suddenly relevant. Any of those things can happen, but for now, this is the end of Phase 1. So, to reiterate for those who have not seen any of these before, I will be linking the playlist with the rest of the videos in the description. But the idea here is if you are planning offense for a battle group, or if you are trying to guide rank ups for a battle group, then this is my take on who the must have champions are and who the nice to have champions are in each class. Those are kind of my two tiers. And then I will go over at the end some honorable mentions or unproven options who I think have use but don't necessarily make planning easier, because that's kind of my minimum criteria for tier 2 is that if somebody has this champion at rank 3, I go, oh, that's helpful, we might use that. If I don't think that, then they're more in the unproven. And this will be particularly important to reiterate on this video. This is never an indictment of a particular champion. Like, placing a champion in tier 2 does not mean I think that they are a worse champion than all of those in tier 1. And placing someone unproven does not mean that I think that they are worse than all of those champions that come before them. I feel I just need to say that again because this is mutant time, and the mutant class is incredibly stacked. So there are a lot of very good characters here. So I'm going to start off with one of the MVPs in Apocalypse. This guy is a beast. His most storied use is, of course, getting to 4 charges, either by winning a few fights, hopefully against a mutant, or by bringing Cable on the team, and then using those 4 charges to make somebody else a Horseman, very often Archangel. Because Horseman Archangel, as we'll get to, is worth the investment. But even aside from that, Apocalypse himself is just an incredible champion to have on offense. You do not need to be making a Horseman with him for him to be a staple of your roster. There are just so many things to go over. Like, this guy can stun through block when he's fully charged. At even 3 charges, he's stun immune while attacking, so you can use him on encroaching stun. He has very long, very powerful specials. He can apply a bunch of different debuffs, several of which can be extremely important. Concussion can swing matches. He's a tank with an extremely high health pool, a bit of crit resistance, which I myself ignored for entirely too long. He's just really, really good. We have assigned him all over the map in the last few seasons, most popularly with our player who brings Archangel, but not always. And there have been a number of times where, even though Archangel would work, we have decided, you know what, Apocalypse actually has more control over that fight, go with him. He's also currently the only champion in the entire game that's fully immune to disorient effects after you wait 8 seconds, and that's now a very big deal on Path 2B, where both of those nodes apply disorients. Now, often they try to place defenders there that counter Apocalypse, but that's not always the easiest thing in the world, and when they do that, they tend to open it up to other options, so he's still absolutely a force. The other reason to have Apocalypse ranked is that if you are trying to make someone a Horseman, you don't want to be doing that with a rank 2 or a 5-star or something like that. You want your big, beefy rank 3 with adrenaline and full damage to just burn through that first fight to get you the 4 charges safely. Even if you are almost only using him as a pre-fight donor, you're going to have to fight with him once, which is actually a brilliant thing about his design I really love on Kabam's part. And it's that much better because, like I said, he is so good. If you don't have one at rank 3, you want to fix that. If your only one is on defense, that's understandable. Get another, get a third. He's a house. So I already mentioned Archangel as the most popular recipient of that Horseman pre-fight from Apocalypse. I don't think I really have to sell Archangel here. Once he gets a few neuros up, if the opponent can bleed and can be poisoned, and there's any way to land heavies, sometimes even without heavies, you can do it with specials. If you can get those neuros up, whatever you're trying to kill is just dead. He's one of the best healing counters in the entire game. He's one of the best damage dealers in the entire game. He has some of the strongest ability accuracy reduction in the entire game. If Archangel can work for a fight, he's probably one of the best. Now, yes, there are champions that are bleed immune, that are poison immune, that mess with his abilities, so don't just throw him in blind. There was actually a long period, for those who don't remember, where the nodes on Alliance War defense were all hidden, and so Archangel was almost useless during that because somebody would just place, a bleed immune champion and you couldn't take in Archangel because he might be useless. But with those days gone, you need this guy around. And the thing is that when Archangel loses fights, it's usually because the RNG didn't line up in your favor, because his bleeds and his poisons are not guaranteed. And so something to boost that ability accuracy is really crucial. The Horseman pre-fight is the biggest factor in this because it gives you that flat 30% ability accuracy. But you can also bring Magneto House of X on the team for, I believe it's 10% extra ability accuracy for all metal champions, which includes Archangel. Now, certain fights are going to require more skill with Archangel, but even a relatively middle-of-the-road player in competitive war is going to be able to gun down quite a bit without too much effort. There's some really great Archangel gameplay out there for a more skilled approach to the champion. I'm going to be linking Jnik's channel in the description. He's done some really great stuff with him. While he was at SSX, Vega did some really impressive fights with him as well. Like I said, I've probably spent too much time pitching him already because you probably know Archangel is amazing. If you don't have one awakened and at rank 3 in your battle group, try and get him there, especially if it's with somebody who also has a rank 3 Apocalypse they can use on offense. So I'll be blunt on this next one. Longtime viewers already know this. I do not like Red Magneto. I think his playstyle is boring. I think there's almost nothing to it, and I think the fact that if you just do that boring playstyle in a matchup where he works, you usually win because he just turns off everything. I find that boring as well. I know this may sound weird coming off Archangel, but I do feel like there is a little bit more to Archangel, and he doesn't feel as broken to me as Magneto, who also gets those perfect blocks, who gets ability accuracy reduction out of the gate, who bypasses things like miss and auto block. He bugs me. I think that his buff was a mistake, and that the game would be more balanced if he just had a few fewer lines of text in him. But this is where we are, and in the current state of the game, if you do not have somebody with a rank 3 Magneto who knows how to use him on offense, you are missing out. Because there are simply fights where he is the best option by a mile. Because he just goes in and he turns it off. Oh, this person is metal, these abilities won't work, these nodes won't matter, this block damage won't matter. He's a monster. You need to have at least one around. Enough said. So last one in my top tier of must-have champions is Omega Red. Now I need to talk about this for a minute because I do think there was a long period there where a high sig Omega Red while running recoil with his appropriate synergies, because those are all important. A lot of his damage comes from having that high sig. He has access to more of it sooner if you were running double edge, so he starts with a bleed. and everything about him functions better if you have Sabretooth or Deadpool X on the team so that he actually keeps those spores up. But there were times when meeting those three conditions just meant that you could bulldoze half the map, and there was not much to it. In my opinion, those days are over. But what we have instead is a meta where if you have a very skilled Omega Red player who checks all three of those boxes and knows how to play around the more complicated nodes and defenders we have these days to really leverage him to his maximum potential, you still have a bomb. You still have something that you can throw at fights that almost nobody else would be able to cleanly take, and he will handle them and come out of the other side smiling. I have a very solid Omega player in my battle group in Sleimon. I would highly recommend his channel. I'll link it in the description, but I don't think he'll be offended by me pointing out Lizer's channel if you're not familiar with hers, because she is his hero and who he learned Omega Red from. Check those two out and you'll see what I mean. These are players who do more than just parry heavy and wait for the opponent to die. There's some finesse to it, but as long as you have that, this is still absolutely a champion you want to have available for offense. If you don't, you're going to end up doing some kind of weird things to replace him at least a few times a season. I know because I went a few seasons without an Omega Red player. We survived, but there were definitely spots where it was like, yeah, that would have been easier if we had him. So moving into tier 2 here, we're going to start off with Cable, who is very, very good if you have Apocalypse on the team and pretty much unusable without it. But he's good enough with Apocalypse, and he adds so much to Apocalypse by allowing you to charge him up without having to take on some weak mutant. Good alliances almost never place a weak mutant early on the map because it's just Apocalypse food these days, and if it's not that, it's Corvus food. You don't really want to charge up either of those champions on the other side. So that means that Cable is usually your best option for getting Apocalypse charged quickly before you need that Horseman pre-fight for some big Archangel fight, or before you need that third or fourth charge so that Apocalypse can take a fight he might otherwise struggle with. Now everything I've said so far can be done with a rank 1 Cable or a 4-star Cable even. But if you have a rank 3 or honestly even rank 2 a lot of the times, 6-star Cable yourself, then you're looking at somebody who can parry heavy and blitz their way through some very difficult matchups and just kind of functions as a different kind of nuke. The team of Apocalypse, Cable, Archangel is extremely flexible and is kind of 3 different flavors of kill it with fire that usually covers 1 or 2 very scary lanes on the field. So having somebody with all 3 is a big deal. But he is in this tier 2 because I do think he's replaceable, and I think that, like I said, you can get a lot out of just having an unranked one on the team. But if you have him, it does add extra flexibility to that team, it adds extra flexibility to your planning, and so he's tier 2. So another textbook tier 2 here. I do not think that you need a Colossus. We currently don't have one, but we have in the past, and he does simplify things. And it's not because he does a lot of damage when he parry heavies. That's how he's used in a lot of content. That is not his purpose in war. In war, what you're looking at is someone who is an option for hazard shift, who is immune to armor break against anyone who is not a tech, and therefore can take path 4B where there are those incidental armor breaks. You're looking at a great havoc counter even when the node inflicts armor breaks. You're looking at a potential Arcus counter. There are just a number of otherwise difficult, important fights that he simplifies, kind of like Red Hulk, but to a lesser extent, and so I think it's helpful to have him around. So Professor X, I think, is probably criminally underused on offense, including by me. He's just a really great champion. He's one of the best miss counters in the entire game. He's one of the most automatic evade counters, provided you have him duped. He does really high special damage and synergizes extremely well with power back boosts. And on top of that, he also has great block proficiency and a few other important tools. Like, he's a really solid champion, but I think he just doesn't get used enough. And so I don't think I can call him essential. Because if all of these top alliances are getting by almost never assigning him, then I can't look you in the eye and tell you that you can't live without him. But I think that it definitely simplifies things to have one available in the hands of a good player. I also think he suffers from a little bit of overreaction to that qualification I just made, in that there are videos on YouTube of absurdly talented players doing ridiculous things with him in endgame content. That is cool, but kind of like we talked about with She-Hulk, that's not necessary in war. You can still get great results out of him by knowing how he works, by being competent with him, but not necessarily being a Munash, a Metal Sonic dude. So don't hold yourself off from trying to apply him in war just because you are not those players. I'm not either. There are still places where I am capable of using Professor X and getting good results that made planning easier on the map. So this one's pretty simple. If you have a SIG 200 rank 3 Namor lying around, it's probably because somebody ranked him for prestige. But if you have that, his SIG is really good, and if you're facing something like a Terrax or maybe a Killmonger that can't be armor broken, etc., there are just places where he's going to be really great for you. You can reverse all that damage, win the fight pretty easily, and you move on. He's niche, which is why he's not essential. There are usually alternatives to him, but it definitely makes things easier to have one around. So, House of X here, I'm a big fan. I am aware that he is not as strong as his villain brother. However, there's still quite a bit going on here. You have really solid special damage, you have a playstyle that does not rely on being able to land, let alone charge heavies, you have reliable armor breaks, you have bleed immunity, and this, for me, is the kicker. You have a champion where if you use them and win fights, then your entire battle group is getting stronger. Because on his base, he has 3 of his pre-fights that replace the active stuns with passive stuns, or just grant attack. Sometimes that's enough to be worth it. And if nothing else, he can use that on himself, and then it's basically a free use. I really think he is not used enough. He's still seen primarily as a synergy piece that you don't need to rank, or a defender. I don't think he's as good as Mr. Fantastic, but I think he's suffering from some of the same perception issues and is behind a few months. Because I think having him ranked, figuring out where he works on the battlefield, is both going to give you more options for potentially restrictive fights, and it's going to make the battle group stronger because he is such a good support champion. I'm also going to point out that he synergizes extremely well with Professor X, because that makes his synergies stronger, and it also doubles the potency of his pre-fight if you place it on the boss. If you have someone who's really good with Professor X, and maybe they bring along Magneto to deal with a couple of the matchups that Professor X had some trouble with, now you have a pre-fight that you can place on the boss that gives whoever's taking that 30% extra attack. That's a free boost that you would have to pay for normally. I definitely think more battle groups should have him around, but obviously not essential. Okay, so last one here, and I'm already anticipating comments that are asking me, how on God's green earth is Kitty Pryde not tier 1? Have you seen what she can do? My answer to that is, yes I have, but I have 2 counterpoints. One, she's still, in my opinion, not essential because you are not seeing people struggle because they don't have access to Kitty. Another reason that I would not put her in that top tier is that by herself, without synergies, she is very good, but she is not game breaking. She only reaches those nutty levels of power when you also have Ghost and Tigra on the team. And when you do that, you are restricting the number of lanes you can take. You are also restricting yourself to, okay, I have a player who can bring along Tigra and make it worth it, who can bring along Ghost without Wasp and make it worth it. So we are talking about a rare level of player quality on a rare path where those three line up and make sense to enable Kitty to be absolutely bonkers in a few fights that she's great for. That is still helpful, which is why she's in this second tier, but I don't think that that's essential. I don't think that as soon as you have that player who's that good and can bring those three at rank 3, that all of a sudden you're just going to be like, that's their game plan. Every single war, they're bringing those 3 people because it trivializes the map. War is simply more complex than that, and I don't think that Kitty is that broken. So for me, she sits firmly in the second tier. So for this last category, the unproven, I'm not actually going to bother listing them this time, because like I said, Mutant is an extremely strong and very deep class. Most of the other mutants can be used for something with decent results. I think it's actually going to be faster for me to just say, if you're looking at Old Man Logan, Sabretooth, OG Storm, either of the Cyclopses, Beast, or any of the Deadpools, I would not bother using them. And then I think that X-23 and Mr. Sinister are probably only a little better than that, where I still really doubt that I would use them. Pretty much everyone else I can see a use for. And somebody might come back with, like, even Jubilee? Well, you know, she gains prowess and she has access to a slow, so you could theoretically take Footloose Jabari with her. That'd be a fairly hard counter. I don't think I would assign that, even if we had a rank 3 Jubilee for offense, but I can see it being done. And there's that level of interaction with most of the mutant kits these days, and almost everyone I just mentioned that I wouldn't put in the unproven or potentials category just hasn't been updated in a really long time, so they may move up later. Anyway, if you find yourself pulling a bunch of mutants and pulling a bunch of resources to rank mutants, as has been said before, you're probably in a pretty good spot. It's a great class. But if you are in that spot where you have a true embarrassment of riches and you are trying to figure out which of your mutants to rank up for war, then I hope this helped you. Either way, I hope this series has been helpful in general, and like I said, I probably will do some updates for it later on. Hopefully with this done, I can maybe get a guide out before season hits again. Anyway, I'll catch y'all next time. Take care.